Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd just like to first thank you all for being here and for this unique opportunity. And I want to thank Mr. Rhodes, our Director for Administration Management, for coming, Mr. Stephen Calvary, the Director of the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, of course, Dr. Patrick Malone. Thank you for being here today. This is being recorded live. It's a live feed, so keep that in mind when you make your comments, please. I'd like to first, hey, it's my distinct privilege to introduce first Mr. Michael Rhodes, who is going to give some brief remarks here. He is known as the Mayor of the Pentagon, so that's an interesting title, but I'll let him continue. Thank you. Yeah.
I have authority and responsibility whenever something's not going right. I've found that out. So, hey, thank you all for being here. And more so than even Chris, I want to thank you for taking the time to come together here today to be able to take part in this session. It's something we want to do more of. We got a tremendous speaker. Tell you, as we're working, as the great folks who are putting this together, we're working on it. One of the things they were trying to think of how do we want to make this really become an impactful event? How do we want to really get that big bang end results of the thing? And it was like almost immediate. I was telling Dr. Malone, it was almost immediate. You got to get Dr. Malone. They had heard him speak at the Key Executive Leadership Program, and there was just without a doubt, this is the guy who had to speak. So I can't take any credit for him. We just met about 3 minutes ago, but I think we're in for a tremendous treat, a tremendous experience, a very positive professional opportunity, and this is something we want to do more of as we're going on. I know it's a little challenging for everybody given our kind of complicated day yesterday. It's made for everybody adjusting and trying to respond and react to a lot of extra things they had to do today, but I appreciate you taking the time. I also know that when you're here, you're not protecting your inbox, and so you're getting tasked volunteered for all kinds of things, right? Remember, whoever's not at the meeting is the one can take on the task. So I know you took a big risk being here, and I appreciate it. This is part of. This is also going to be available for rebroadcast, right? It's not just live, but more importantly, it's being taped so we can have it as a source. We're going to go back to. Yeah, great, awesome. This is a part of an extension and a continuation of the implementation of our DA&M family, Director of Administration and Management family's strategic plan. And as you probably may know, one of the pillars under there was the workforce, one of the key pillars we wanted to work on. And what can we do? How do we do it? How do we take care of that focus on our people? You all execute some critical, very important missions on behalf of this department. You execute some critical and very important missions that nobody knows who does them and how they get done. It's all the enabling functions that need to be done. And while those missions are the priority, I mean, at the end of the day, they're the number one priority, the fact is they're done by people. And so I kind of do that reverse math, that algebra I never understood when I was in grade school. And I can extrapolate, though, and know that really the number one thing is people, because you all are the ones that are executing that important mission. So a key pillar of the strategic plan of that effort was, what can we do for the workforce? How can we help? And the mentoring program, the mentoring effort, hopefully you've gone online and found it. If not, we'll get you information to be able to do that. We want to take advantage of the opportunity to support one another, to get our leadership and our leader teams to be able to work with everybody across the workforce and to work with peers to help advise and discuss and talk about different elements of one's career and how we further that and how we progress in that domain and in that respect. I pop there on the website, on the mentoring website. I got to admit, not as often as I plan to. I always have it scheduled, and then I allow myself, unfortunately, to become overcome by events. But I do pop onto it regularly to kind of respond to comments, to engage with people in some of their areas of topics and ideas and other elements. But I encourage you, if you haven't done it, if you haven't signed up for the mentoring opportunity, please do so. Please engage into it as much, as fulsome, or as little as you'd like, but there's going to be something for you there, I'm absolutely sure. and I'm very encouraged by it. I'm very encouraged by this kind of speaker series, and we're going to try and do this more often on a recurring basis, just to add, to supplement, to complement that effort of focusing on the workforce. There are many things we can do, and we need to be able to do those. I do want to steal one other minute. Talk about the Secretary came out with a press conference last week, which dealt with all of us, in a way. And he dealt with the OSD organization and the review that Mr. Donnelly, the former Air Force Secretary and former Director of Administration and Management, had undertaken on his behalf. As you know, over the course of this year, the department's been looking at different ways, management reviews, to see at different ways we can organize for the future, different ways we can organize in an environment of reducing resources. In addition to that review, the Secretary had directed us to all look at how we can deal with 20% reduction in resources and costs in headquarters and overhead activities, and we've been undertaking that. Near the end of that, he asked Mr. Donnelly, after Mr. Donnelly retired as the Air Force Secretary, to say, not so fast on that flight out to the West Coast where his family's from and he was going to spend a few months. He asked him to look at all those results and give him a third opinion, kind of a third set of eyes outside, looking at it, and made some recommendations. And Mr. Donnelly did that, and Secretary digested them and then announced his decisions last Thursday. One of those, which is of interest to some of you, would be the consolidation of Director of Administration Management, Deputy Chief Management Officer, and the Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Intelligence Oversight. Elements of all those into one organization. We're going to work on an implementation plan, much to be done in the next several months to implement that. But I'll just tell you my opinion. I've been involved with this all along, quite frankly, in a small circle of folks as they were working to develop them. At the end of the day, I don't see much change for the vast, vast majority of our family. Yep, like everybody, we're going to have some reduced resources, and that'll be implemented over time. But responsibility-wise, functions-wise, much of the reporting dynamic-wise, I'm not trying to be presumptive of all end states here, but I just don't see much difference. There was not a change really to Washington Headquarters Services in those decisions. There was not a change to Pentagon Force Protection Agency in those decisions. Somewhat oversimplifying, but I see it mainly that all the management functions of the department are going to be under one principal that is a presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed, the DCMO. So the DA&M domain will go under there, and some other management responsibilities will be under there, but I don't see that really changing what you do day to day, what you do on behalf of the great work you do on behalf of this department and how you're structured and how you're implementing it. So more to come. I'll get more information out as it's forming and as it's evolving, but I just wanted to share for those from the DA&M family here what I see from that element. But again, thank you for the time. I'm going to shut up here in just a second and let our speaker get introduced. Just got to tell you, he knows the department. He's been involved and around the department for a good number of years in his adult career, and then he's been over in academia, really working on management issues and talking about leadership and studying and researching and communicating about the dynamics that dealing with leadership and management and decision-making processes. He's going to be a tremendous speaker. I think you're going to just have a great engagement here, and we really are very appreciative, Dr. Malone, of you taking the time to be here and join with us. So, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Laura. You're going to take care of that formal aspect of it, right? Again, thank you for taking time to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes, and thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Laura Devlin. I'm with WHS's Human Resources Directorate, and with PFPA, we are the co-proponents, if you will, of the DA&M mentoring program. In addition, both of our organizations have been involved and worked closely with American University in their key executive programs, and that's how we came to work with Dr. Malone and have him come here as a distinguished speaker. So I'm thrilled today to introduce him. Dr. Malone is a faculty member of American University's Department of Public Administration and Policy. He teaches courses there in public sector leadership, organizational analytics, ethics, and public administration and policy. In addition, he serves as a senior advisor and the faculty member to their key executive programs. He is a retired Navy captain, having spent 22 years with the Department of Defense, and his most recent publications include enhancing your leadership by tapping into staff attitudes, leading up, and the untapped power of action and learning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Malone.
Thank you, Laura, very much. Thank you, and Mayor Rhodes, thank you so much for your kind words. And I just want to say thanks as well to Kate and Sandra, who suffered through my class at American and were kind enough to call me and say, would you mind coming over and chatting? It really is an honor to be here today with you all. I did spend 22 years in the military. I am a retired Navy captain, which outranks the Army and Air Force colonels just a little bit. Just pointing that out for those of you that, just a little bit. We outrank them just a little bit. At American University, well, let me go back. The whole Navy thing, let me just put your mind at ease about that from the very beginning. I didn't get the opportunity to serve in the Pentagon while on active duty. I did get the opportunity to have a lot of time at sea. I was on the USS Royal Caribbean, the USS Disney, the USS Carnival, and the USS Norwegian. Now, these are very dangerous vessels. They're dangerous for your waistline, all right? So they're dangerous ships to be on. And that was where I spent the majority of my time. Actually, I spent almost all of my time in the Navy working in the Surgeon General's office and teaching at the medical school in Bethesda. So 19 years of service in this area and 3 years of hardship duty in Jacksonville, Florida. So that's how the Navy career worked out. Now, at American University, I teach in two different capacities. One, I call them my 20-somethings. These are those adorable 25-year-old graduate students who are getting their MPA and getting their MPP, and they're so energetic and they're in love with the public service, which is just exciting. It's really terrific. And whenever I talk in those classes, this is what I get from them. I get this, oh, Professor Malone, please just continue to talk because I'm going to write down everything you say because you're so brilliant. You're the professor. And then I teach in the executive programs, all right? The executive programs are GS 13, 14, 15s, and senior executive service. And I walk into that classroom, and this is what I get from them. Okay, big boy, show me what you got. Which is terrific. And I'm going to assume that you guys are the latter. I'm going to assume that that's where you guys are, so I'll try very hard to be good today. It is an honor to be here. And here's my spoiler alert for you. The spoiler alert is that the single most effective predictor of leadership success is relationships, are relationships. I couldn't figure out what the grammar was on that. Is it is or are? It is, right? Okay, it is relationship. Relationships are us. Okay, so that's the single most effective predictor. And if everybody I saw everyone kind of nod, if everybody kind of agrees with that, then why is it so hard? Why is it so difficult? Why are relationships so tough for us? When you look at organizations, and I love doing organizational analysis, when we look at organizations, we find that there's a lot of neat structure. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of standard operating procedures, right? There's a lot of culture and history, which is a good thing sometimes, and sometimes that can work against you, right? Sometimes cultures kind of backfire on you. So with all these things in place, sometimes we forget that really what matters are the relationships because we tend to focus on those things that are easy to handle, they're easy to hold on to. And what I want to talk about today is kind of a little bit about the environment where you are because I don't think that it's fair to even talk about this without acknowledging what a tough environment it is right now. And then I want to talk about the components of relationships, and then I've got a big finish for you. A big finish for you, okay? Now, did anybody see when the president started singing the Al Green song? Anybody remember seeing that? I see a couple of nods, right? He was captured on, this is actually out on YouTube, he was captured singing this wonderful blues song by this tremendous performer named Al Green. And those of you that remember, just a show of hands, remember seeing that? Okay, snap with me, will you? Just kind of give me this. All together now, come on. Keep going. I'm so in love with you. Am I right? Was it? Okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. Well, you know, here's what I loved about that. I love that because there's an intimacy and a love and a passion for the public service that I know the president feels, I know that you all feel it, I know that I feel it, and it's a wonderful component of what we do to serve in the public service. And in order to have that love and that intimacy, you have to have a relationship. The problem is that the agency reality right now is not a good place to be. I mean, any agency. They're all tough places to be right now. How do you think, how's the reality affecting our relationships right now? Anybody, just throw something out. Does it make you feel tired? Exhausted? Anything? Unappreciated. Thank you. That's a good one. Unappreciated. What else? Overworked. These things take a toll. They take a toll. And let me just put something right now, just kind of put this out of the way for you. Emotions. Emotions are never irrational. Emotions are never irrational. The actions that we take based on those emotions may be irrational, but emotions themselves are never irrational, and that's something I think we tend to forget. We should embrace the emotions that we're feeling. We've been asked at the university many times recently, I got people coming back from a shutdown, I got people that are not working their normal hours, haven't had a pay raise in 3 years, what do I need to do? And you got to embrace that emotion. You got to acknowledge that the pain is there. It's there for everyone, even those that didn't get affected. All of us got affected, seriously. Everybody did. And those that were affected by the most recent shutdown have been affected by having to come back and do triple work to catch up from that shutdown, right? It wasn't like a 6-day vacation. So lack of a pay raise, furloughs, shutdowns, doing more with less, this is really what we're facing right now in the federal sector. And I think that this is very clearly seen in the chronic anger and the anxiety and the futility that some of us feel. Looking at our elected officials, it's okay, I can say that, and saying, come on, guys, get it right. You know, please, we're trying to run a democracy here. If you look at the most recent Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey numbers, has anybody seen these, by the way? Okay, they just recently came out. I'll give you a clue as to how they look. It's not good news. For the section titled My Work Experience, there are 28 questions. 27 of those questions declined. And I'm not talking about declined a little, declined statistically significantly. And oh, by the way, for 2 consecutive years now. 27 of the 28. Under the section about my agency, all the questions, 13 of them down. For the section on leadership, 10 questions, all down. For the section on job satisfaction, 9 questions, all down. If there's any good news in this most recent survey, it's about the My Supervisor and Team Leader section, which, if you look at it closely, indicates that we're doing the best we can. Given what's going on, we're really doing the best we can. And that's great. And some people will say, you know what, it's all been the economy, it's been the economy. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but if it is, does it really matter? The fact is that the numbers tell us there's distress. The federal executives that I work with every day tell me it's distress. It's emotionally taxing. It's a very difficult environment to work. And whenever we're faced with working in this kind of environment, we lose our self-awareness. We lose our emotional intelligence. We lose our ability to manage our actions. We become less socially aware. It's just a natural follow-on of what we're facing, and our relationships suffer. And what leaders in the federal government are looking for now are ways to re-engage. They're looking for ways to reconnect, and the people that they lead are looking for that as well. They're looking for that as well. So there's never been a better time to talk about what relationships really are all about. Now, relationships are often referred to as soft skills. Okay, fine. I don't buy that. But they're referred to as soft skills. It's almost like there's something a little less than science. They're a little less than quantitative. There's a guy named Dan Goleman, and I'm gonna show you. I always like to recommend books. I don't get any royalties for these books, mind you, okay? Because I just write articles. These books are just books that I happen to like. So Dan Goleman, in his book on primal leadership, he makes the point that, you know what, once you're hired into an organization, everybody's about as smart as everybody else. So let's just put the expertise thing on the shelf. That's the ticket to the game. Those are table stakes. That's what it takes to get in the door. Once you're there, what really matters is your ability to relate with other people. That's what really matters. Everybody's about as smart as one another. Another book that I think is a really good one is, this is Jim Collins. Now, this is not the Good to Great book that he wrote, the classic one that most people know about. Just so you know, in that particular book, what Jim Collins talked about in the Good to Great book is he interviewed several hundred CEOs of companies that were very successful. And he had very quantitative, clear measures, return on investment, profit margins. There was no argument these were successful companies. And he tried to find what the singular characteristic was of the CEOs that ran all these successful companies. Does anybody know what it was? Humility. Humility. And by virtue, the ability to relate with the people that they worked with. Number one. Now, I'm not a big fan of books like this in general because typically they ignore the government. So I'm not going to be pushing his book, but I will say this. This thing right here behind me says Good to Great for the Social Sectors. If you go on Amazon, it's a $13 book. It's 62 pages long, and it's Good to Great for the Social Sectors. What Jim Collins did is he wrote a book based on his research that applies to the public sector. And what he says is that one of the things that we really miss in the public sector as executives is autonomous decision-making authority. It's one of the things that's pretty absent for most federal sector executives. So the way that federal sector executives succeed, the way that we all succeed in the public sector is through relationships, through building the right kind of environment. And make no mistake, this is not easy to do with people that work in the federal sector. I'm going to read you this quote. "The most stubborn habits which resist change with the greatest tenacity are those which worked well for a space of time and led to the practitioner being rewarded for those behaviors. If you suddenly tell such persons that their recipe for success is no longer viable, their personal experience belies your diagnosis. The road to convincing them is hard. It is the stuff of classic tragedy." This is day one of my diagnosis and development of the leadership self course that I teach in our executive program. Because the people that walk in that room, the GS 13s, 14s, and 15s, that walk in that room have been rewarded for years for their expertise. And on day one, I acknowledge it. It's wonderful. Now let's put it on the shelf. Now let's talk about you. Let's talk about what you're about. Getting people focused on this softer, huggy-feely, less scientific kind of set of skills is a real challenge. But it's important. I mean, I've been at USDA and talked to biochemists. I've been at Federal Home Financing Administration with economists and lawyers. Sorry, are there any lawyers in the room? Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. But it is a challenge, and it's because we've been rewarded. It was the same way for me in the Navy. You're really rewarded for these skills, and it's difficult to get beyond them. So let's talk about the complexity of relationships. Now, here's my push, or here's my selling point today is going to be on relationships. My self-awareness, the relationship recipe, and the empathy. Now, if you think that looks kind of familiar, yes, MREs. I'm in the Pentagon. I had to do something that kind of tie. I know not everybody in here is military or former military, but that's kind of what they are. And I thought, wow, if you don't remember anything today, you're going to remember the guy talked about MREs. What did that really mean? So now we know. So the first one I want to talk about is self-awareness. I was at the Federal Executive Institute in Charlottesville last month. How many of you have been there? Wonderful place, right? Wonderful program, really, really neat program. And I was there doing a session on leading from where you are. Now, when you think about leading from where you are, most people think about where I am in the organization. And typically that phrase is attributed to middle managers. Leading from where I am. I'm not the boss, but I'm not the bottom, so I'm going to lead from where I am. Well, what I'm really talking about here, where self-awareness is concerned, is leading from where you are. You, not your title, not your education, not the initials after your name, not where your office is, not where you park, not whether you have a flag in your office or not, where you are as a person, in your heart. This guy, Bill Plotkin, is a fascinating psychologist, lives out in Colorado, who runs a thing called the Animas Institute. And he calls himself a psychologist gone wild because he ties nature into his practice of psychology. And if you go to his website, it's the coolest thing. It says, "Guiding the Descent to the Soul since 1967. Think about that for a second. Think about guiding the descent to the soul and what that really means. If you were trying to descend to your soul, one of the great joys of the work that I get to do, one of the real honors of the work that I get to do is I have my students write a paper about their descent to their soul. And I see you smiling back there. And it is a very difficult paper for them to write. And the passages are just so incredibly touching. When people start thinking about where they are, what their values are, and what they're truly all about, it's the first step in self-awareness. I mentioned that I have a couple of books to recommend you. This is what this midlife crisis can sometimes it feels like this, where you're beginning to feel a genuine concern for your employees. There's a guy named Bob Buford who wrote a book called Halftime. And Bob Buford is a guy that was a telecommunications guru up in Northeast Texas and multimillionaire, very, very successful. And what he wrote about was his midlife crisis. And he said, I've accomplished everything I want to accomplish. And he writes in this book, he says, just so you know, I own a home in Aspen, I'm not giving it up. Just so you know, I drive a Lexus, I'm not giving that up either. So this isn't about me being successful and then giving everything away and being poor the rest of my life. This is about what am I going to do with the rest of my life? What am I going to do with my values, with what I'm really, truly about? And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. I really recommend it. But it kind of gets to this point of where are we? And that's what self-awareness is about. This is a very important slide. Things are not always what they seem. There's a woman sitting at a bar, and she's got a big German Shepherd sitting next to her. And this sleazy guy walks in, and he goes, "Hey, does your dog bite?" And she says, "No." And so he sits down next to her, he orders a beer, and the dog bites him on the leg. And he goes, "Hey, I thought you said your dog didn't bite." And she says, "He doesn't. That's not my dog." Things are not always what they seem. Sometimes we mask ourselves. This is a scary slide. I want this slide burned into your brain today. It's a frightening image because we all wear these masks. We all wear these masks. They protect us from our anxiety. They protect us from our fear. They protect us from our anger. And most importantly, they protect us from not being good enough. I'm not good enough. That was the most overblown introduction of me I've ever heard between the mayor and Laura. I mean, it was just crazy, right? I'm not good enough. I mean, I wake up with that fear. I've got that in my brain. All of us have, to some degree, the desire and the drive and the want to measure up. And when we wear these masks, we're lonely because we're not showing people who we truly are. There's a woman that my wife works with. My wife is an engineer. I'll tell you more about her later. But she works with a woman named Lauren, and this happened a few years ago. Lauren is this tremendously talented nuclear engineer or whatever she is. I don't know. It's some very complicated engineer world. And she made the decision a number of years ago that she was going to change the way she behaved. Lauren was very introverted and very bright, not terribly aggressive, and she found that she wasn't going anywhere in her defense contracting company, whose name I won't mention. And she made a conscious decision to change her behavior. She decided she was going to be the first one to speak up, doggone it, with all those white men she works with. She was going to be the first one to talk, right? All those 60-year-old dudes in there, she was going to speak right up. She wasn't going to wear makeup anymore. She stopped wearing jewelry. She started wearing suits that looked like I could wear them, right? She purposely changed the way that she acted because she wanted so badly to succeed. What do you think happened? She succeeded. She did. She climbed the ladder. She did very well until she got home at night. When she got home at night, she was a mess. She broke down every night. Her physical health deteriorated terribly. She looked like a different person. Drawn, tired. She wasn't being her. She was wearing this mask. She was falling apart. She was lonely. My boss at AU, a guy named Bob Tobias, who's just a really wonderful guy, he uses this phrase in his class where he says, "Why am I so lonely if they're applauding so hard?" You know, there was a guy named Charles Lohr. He was a Medical Service Corps Admiral. And when I was in Newport, Rhode Island at Officer Indoctrination School, I met him there. And I was like any other brand new Lieutenant JG in the Navy. I was fascinated by the gold and everything. It's just so cool. And this very statuesque admiral and all this. And I found myself in the first few years of active duty just being so enamored with who these people were. They had people walking around with ropes and carrying briefcases and all these things. And I got to know Admiral Lohr in my first 5 or 6 years in the Navy. He finally retired. We stayed friends, and as I got to know him out of uniform, I realized that while he was there, while he was in uniform, he was a lonely and broken man. He had health problems, he had horrible marital problems, and he died just a few years afterwards. And we didn't see that. You know, we saw this image of someone that we thought that he was the director. He was here. And of course, all of us are maneuvering our way around him in meetings so that we could be seen, you know, so the admiral, want to make sure the admiral sees me, so I'm going to stand right over here, and then I'm going to be talking to you, but I'm going to be checking up, you know, just making sure that he sees that I'm here. And it made me feel so ashamed because I was just as guilty of that as everybody else. And he was wearing a mask. He was wearing the mask of an admiral in the Navy. And it was a very sad thing to see, a very sad thing to see. One more thing about the masked aspect, and that is the bee that buzzes around in your ear. I'm talking about the inner critic. The inner critic is something that a lot of times we don't want to address. You are not smart enough. You are not thin enough. You are not good enough. In our program at AU, one of the things that Bob asks everyone on day one, and this is a brilliant exercise, what was your biggest childhood challenge? And what gets shared in that room when people talk about their childhood challenges is the first step in addressing that inner critic. We had one woman, she was 15, and she shared that she really struggled because she was such a perfectionist. And so we were asking her, well, why do you feel like that was an issue? She goes, well, I'm just such a perfectionist that it drives my staff. My staff hates me. They can't stand me because I'm such a perfectionist at work and I can't help myself. And so we said, well, when you feel yourself becoming a perfectionist, what do you hear? What do you actually hear in your ear? And she paused for a second and she said, I hear my father telling me that my grades weren't high enough. It was an A, but it was only a 96. Where are the other 4 points? And she carried that with her her whole life. And she didn't realize it until she started thinking about what her inner critic really was. Big component of self-awareness. Now, Daniel Goleman talks about these main sections of self-awareness, and I think these are all good. This is a limbic system-generated thing. This is a field. This is an internal field. People with strong self-awareness are very attuned to their inner signals. So they know if they're starting to get a little enraged, a little angry perhaps, a little frustrated, they know it's happening. And they also understand that it impacts their actions. So they think about that. They think about that. They know they're able to exhibit a sense of humor. That's not something we see in the workplace often enough, I don't think. That's going to be something I'm going to write about in the next year, I think, a sense of humor in the workplace. Workplaces should be fun. I think they should be fun. We're all for the same mission. We're all here for the same reason. Let's have a good time while we're doing it. One of the funnest jobs I ever had was being a surgical tech. Anybody watch Grey's Anatomy? Okay, Grey's Anatomy. You know the people that pass the instruments in surgery? That's how I worked my way through college. I was a surgical tech. I took a year, went to school, scrubbed on everything. Had the greatest time ever. More fun in that operating room than anywhere. Open hearts, craniotomies, kidney transplants, everything. More fun in that OR than I've ever had in any other workplace in my life, probably save where I am right now. We had a great time. And there's bodies opened up right there, right? So use of humor in the workplace is a wonderful part. Gracefulness in learning. Not easy to do. Not easy for professors to do. We're supposed to know all the answers. I didn't know that. I'm on this journey too with you guys. Right now, I'm telling you right now, here's myself. I'm on this journey too with all of you. So gracefulness in learning, knowing when to ask for help. And then if you know your abilities and you know your strengths, there's a tremendous amount of self-confidence that goes along with that. Now, people ask all the time, well, how do I improve my self-awareness? Well, here's, I think, my favorite exercise for improving your self-awareness, and that is write down the roles that you play in your life. Father, great husband, brother, cousin, teacher, elder, whatever. Write them down. Neighbor. And immediately in the next column, write what that makes you feel like. So for me as a son, the feeling that I feel when I say I'm a son is immediately dread. That's my gut feeling because I've got an elderly mom who lives in North Texas who won't leave because my family don't go north of the Red River, just saying. They don't go north of the Red River. So she's never leaving, and I can't do anything about it. So I'm fearful. I dread it. I'm worried about her. She's older. She's in poor health. You know, I've tried to get her to Maryland. Oh, honey, I just can't move up that far where all them Yankees are. You know, so, but think about the roles that you play because identifying that feeling, that emotion is the first step in understanding what your next steps need to be, what actions you need to take. But take the time to do it. Most effective exercise I've ever seen. I've had people come back to me months later after class and say, oh my God, I did that. It was incredible. I am so at peace now because now I have written it down and I see and I'm able to admit how I feel about it. Okay, move on to the next one, relationship recipe. Now there's 3 parts to this. Recognizing the space, crossing the bridge, and having the encounter. Let me make a very minor but very important distinction here about relationships. I used to work with a guy in the Navy whose name was Glenn. And Glenn was a very talented, bright guy. And he was the kind of guy that anytime you sent him an email, he would respond. If you asked him something, you know, I'm really busy. I'm working with Admiral so-and-so on this, blah, blah, blah. Not really going to have time. I don't have time to do that project, but I can co-direct it with someone. I'm busy with Admiral so-and-so on this day. I'm busy with Admiral so-and-so on this day. You know, the governor of Virginia called me yesterday. Always there was a name there. There was always, you know, I'm always so busy and I'm just really tied up. And here's the other thing that Glenn did. Whenever he would be in meetings and he would be, or in settings like this or social events, he would shake your hand. And as he shook your hand, he'd be like, yeah, listen, it's great seeing you. So let's get together and we'll do lunch. Okay, good. Yeah, take care, Steve. See, I mean, you know, that kind, right? I mean, that's what he would do. And so here's the thing about Glenn is that he really was not well respected. Glenn had a lot of contacts. Glenn thought he had a lot of relationships. He didn't have any relationships. There were no relationships there. None. And I'm a little worried about our new graduates because I was doing this policy conference last year and I asked all these wonderful, bright MPP students, Masters in Public Policy students, what's important for public policy? And resources, you know, this and that. And someone said contacts. And I said, what is a contact? What does that really mean? Contacts are the old things that some of us refer to as Rolodexes. Those are contacts. Relationships are different. So let's talk about this first step, recognizing the space. Relationships do not exist in me or in you. They exist here, in this space between us. And that space has to be clear for a relationship to really work. Emotions can cloud that space. Distrust can cloud that space. We can pollute that space very easily. I was standing on the front porch of my house. This is a true story. Not that the other ones I have told you were not. These are all true. I'm standing on my porch a few months ago, and my wife comes out. I'm out in the front yard talking to a neighbor. My wife comes out of the front door, and she says the following: honey, did you cancel Quinn's piano lesson, which was supposed to happen like right then? Now, this is what I heard her say. What I heard her say was, hey, soft and squishy relationship boy with a social science background, you don't know anything. You can't even keep a schedule. And you're a useless husband because you're afraid of heights. And you can't even fix the gutter. And you probably forgot Quinn's piano lesson, didn't you? That's what I heard. So I responded. And what I said was, oh, I'm so sorry, my love. I forgot. I thought that you were going to cancel that lesson. Now here's what Terry heard. Hey, little Miss Engineer who thinks you know everything, not everything equals 1, 1 plus 2. Sometimes things are much more complicated, and just because you're busy doesn't mean I'm not busy. That's what she heard. So I polluted the space, then she polluted the space, and then it got worse, right? Then it got worse. And as the space becomes more dangerous, there's a lot less likelihood that anything is really going to get resolved. So think about that space. Now, the end of that story, she was right, which is how I know, because I was supposed to call, and once again, I am totally convinced now that God is a woman, because she was right in the situation, and it's just the way it is. So I'm comfortable with that. Okay, so now we've addressed the issue of space. Now, I'm ready to cross that bridge. I'm ready to have the encounter with this individual. So I take a deep breath. I feel my anger, I feel my frustration, I feel my pain. If I'm meeting with someone who's important, my boss, whatever, I feel a little nervousness. But the fact that I feel that stuff tells me that I am in the present. It's okay to acknowledge. I was really nervous about today. I'm never nervous about groups. I was nervous about today because it's the Pentagon, because of what you all do. I mean, it's always an honor to work with people in the public service, but it made me a little nervous today. I was like, oh man, I better get a haircut. Which I did, for the record. I did yesterday, and I even shaved, okay? But I was a little nervous. So I've got to be willing to drop that bag. I've got to be willing to make a choice to walk across that bridge in a space that is not polluted any longer. And I've got to leave all my baggage behind me. I've got to leave that fear of not being good enough. I got to leave that fear of they're not going to like me. I've got to leave that fear of I'm going to disappoint people who I've met and who asked me to come here, and then they're going to, oh, I'm really sorry we invited this guy. He was good in class, but here he's not so hot. I mean, I've got to put all that down and just be who I am, right? And cross that bridge. And in that bag, by the way, is my inner critic. There's a guy named Robert Quinn who wrote a book called Deep Change, and he talks about walking naked into the land of uncertainty. I used that phrase with Health and Human Services at their offsite for their director's office last year, and they loved it. There's still people over there talking about walking naked into the land of uncertainty. Someone called me a few days later, hey, Patrick, really enjoyed your presentation. We're all naked. We're all in the land of uncertainty. This is awesome. You know, it's just great. It's embracing the unknowing. It's being able to embrace not really knowing. It's okay. It's just okay not to know. I saw a quote the other day that I used when we were meeting with someone from Merit Systems Protection Board, and I said, it's like being comfortable without any irritable search for fact and reason. It's just irritable. We don't have to worry about that. Just let it go. Leave that baggage there, be who you are, and cross that bridge. Now, the only thing you can take with you on this walk across the bridge is a clear plastic bag to remind you that you left everything behind. Just remember that TSA requires that this bag be only 10 ounces and be of a certain weight measure and only include those kind of items, okay? So, I'm now ready for the encounter. I have no protection. I'm self-aware. The space is clear. The space is open. Now I have to have the encounter. Now I make that move to have the encounter. Here's what happens when I have the encounter. When I arrive, I'm present. There are no distractions. I'm resonating. This concept of resonance is so insanely cool. Limbic resonance, and it ties to the limbic system within the body. Scientists at UC California, or UC San Francisco, and Yale and Harvard, and a number of other places have been looking at this in the last 30 years, and what they've decided is that our nervous systems are not self-contained. They're not self-contained. They're actually attuned to those around us with whom we share a connection. You can feel the presence, and those of you know what I'm talking about. You've felt the presence of people. You've felt that connection with people before, without a doubt in my mind. Limbic resonance is this symphony of mutual exchange where there's harmony at an emotional level, at an intellectual level. We're on the same wavelength. Have any of you ever been told that you suck the air out of a room? Huh? Have you? Have you been told, are you the kind of person that wears that, where you walk into a room and people know, and you know they know, but you can't help it. You go in and you just got a phone call that made you unhappy or sad or whatever, and you go in and you try to put a good face on, and all day today I was thinking, man, I hope nothing happens. I hope the school doesn't call about my teenager. And, oh, Quinn's missing from school again. You know where she is? I'm like, oh man, I can't have that on my mind when I go in there. It's going to show. And that's what this resonance thing is all about. It's this connection where you've seen people that walk into meetings that are filled with panic, that have They have anxiety. You can feel it, and it brings the whole room down. It brings the whole room down. And then people that walk in that have joy, that want to be there, that are expressive, it brings the whole room up. That's this limbic connection that I'm referring to whenever we talk about having this encounter. Neurobiologists tell us that when we resonate with someone, the parts of our brain that fuel anger and fear go dark. They go dark. In other words, we're comfortable. We're at peace. And when that happens, really, really good things can happen. Good decisions can happen, better communication happens, and it also increases our ability to be empathetic. Now, I put Mother Teresa up here for a reason, because I think Mother Teresa was a pretty empathetic dude. You know, a dudette. I really do. I think she was a very empathetic person. And I see empathy as the lubricant for everything we've talked about today. That caring, that ability to understand how others are feeling and to recognize it, to sense it, to sense it. You know, there have been studies in recent years about physicians. And one study in particular I remember talked about if a physician, when the patient comes into the room, to the exam room, if the physician just shuts up for 2 minutes and lets the patient talk, the likelihood of that physician being sued goes to almost zero, despite the clinical outcome of the visit. Even if they make a mistake. 2 minutes. Sit, let the patient talk. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Mother Teresa said that empathy starts with a you. You. And she says, do it privately, one-to-one. Don't be afraid to cry. It's okay to let a tear. It's okay. We're not weak. It's not a sign of weakness for a man or a woman. It's okay. Connect on that human level. Do it person to person. The other reason I mention empathy here, I usually don't make this big deal about empathy, but another reason I make a big deal about empathy today is because of some recent research at George Mason, right down the street, and University of Michigan, on the folks that make up about 13% of our federal workforce, the Generation Ys and the millennials. Why would I be concerned about their empathy? Anybody know? Social networking. Their relationships, any of you who have teenagers right now, you know, I've got 2 older daughters, which is why I'm always look so tired, and I've got 1 younger daughter. And the 2 older daughters were raised pre-internet. Not totally, but they didn't have the internet that the younger one has. Relationships are different now. Relationships are different now. And even for my college-age daughters and my recently graduated daughter, relationships, when someone is tired of their relationship, what do? They defriend. And what the folks at Michigan and Mason, and other schools as well, are looking at is, what does this mean for relationships in the workplace? I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I can tell you right now, I bring this up to my 20-something students every single semester, including as recently as last week. And I ask them what they think. And you know what they say? I don't know. They don't have any idea, because they've grown up in this social network world. So relationships look different to them than they do to us. They're defined differently. The parameters are different. So these studies are showing, I think somewhat conclusively, that they tend to be less empathetic, which worries me a little bit. You know, and I'm not picking on that age group. They're wonderfully bright young men and women, but it is something for us to be aware of as leaders, because their perspective of what empathy is and what relationships mean just look different than most of us do. So I put that out there as just something to kind of think about. Okay, so here's my final word. I love this quote, and I use it in almost every time I speak, because Dan Finn at Harvard, he wrote this actually in a book. And here, I'm going to read it so you can read it with me. Where did the American people ever get the idea that figuring out how many blue chips to put into laundry powder so it could be called New Swish, and increasing point-of-sale purchases is more important than keeping the nation and our homes safe? and mapping the oceans and managing the infrastructure of a free society and providing food and housing and caring to the most vulnerable among us, all the tasks to which public servants devote their minds and hearts. Dan has done I sent him an email about this quote. I think he's done a wonderful job of capturing in a very eloquent way what you all do. What you all do. And everybody owes you a thank you, including me. So thank you, because this is what you do. This is what you do. You run a democracy. You care for people. I don't know if any of you saw this in Financial Times last week. There was an article about Nelson Mandela, and they were talking about an event that he had that I think ties very closely to this discussion about relationships. In 1993, there was a general in South Africa that had planned a series of guerrilla attacks because he did not want to support a multiracial government. So here's what Nelson Mandela did. This very aggressive, assertive, militant, bad person got an invitation from Nelson Mandela to come over for tea. Mandela met him at the door, handed him the cup, asked him if he wanted sugar or cream, poured the tea himself, served this general, sat down with him, and talked with him, built a relationship with him, convinced him to run for the African Parliament, which he did, and got elected, and became a big advocate for multiracial government and was one of the biggest supporters of South Africa's move to democracy. I think that's a pretty cool story about a guy named Nelson Mandela. And I think that what he did and what you all do, as what Dan Finn points out here, it's all tied to relationships. These things happen because of the relationships that we build with one another and that we build with the citizens that we serve. So let's get this off on the right track. If we're going to get started on relationships, here's what you have to do. You have to turn to the person next to you. You don't have to stand up. Just look to the person next to you and say the following. No, not like that. Say it like this. Say it like this. I'm so in love with you. No? Okay. Look, thank you. It's been such an honor to be with you guys today. I really appreciate the invitation. And thank you all, and God bless you for all the work that you do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malone. And we're going to actually have a quick time here for about 5 minutes or so of questions and answers. If anyone has any questions for Dr. Malone, this is your opportunity.
To say at the beginning, just ask any time.
Oh, can you start over then? And
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
thanks.
So it's wonderful to be here today. You know, I spent my time on the Navy. No, I'm just
I've
kidding.
got a question.
Oh, yes, please.
And I'll start off. You know, you made a good point about, I think, the social media thing and with kids just using that to relate and with texting and all that. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help but going back to your limbic resonance thing and how maybe there's a lack of that now as much as there was before. Is there maybe a connection there? Or what do you think about it?
I think that's a great question. And I think that the answer is yes, there is a disconnect there because that limbic resonance is something that is a physiological change in the body. What the researchers haven't determined yet is whether or not that physiological change takes place in a text message, right, or on a social media platform the way that it does when I can actually sit near you and I can look at you and I can see that that you look the way you look or you're wearing what you're wearing, and we can make a connection that way. So yeah, the answer is that there's definitely a disconnect to the extent that is an impact on the limbic system. That's something that's still being researched right now. I'm looking really forward to hearing more about how this plays out. And as I mentioned before, I have a lot of 20-something grad students every semester, and they want to know as well, because believe me, they want to be you. I mean, they do want to be you. They so badly want to be you. And they know that what they're bringing is skills in certain areas and things that aren't quite up to speed in others. So it's going to be an interesting journey for them. Any other questions? How about them Dallas Cowboys, huh? I did say I was from Texas. I usually show a Dallas Cowboy helmet, but I didn't think it was appropriate since they got slaughtered the other night. It just wasn't as fun anymore. Well, look, my email address is pmalone@american.edu. So if anybody has any questions, if you'd like some more literature on this, if you'd like me to send you an article or two or you just want to talk about it more, don't hesitate to call me. And of course, Kate and Sandra know how to reach me as well. And I'm more than happy to talk with you more about this. It's a subject I'm really passionate about, you know, the relationships and the authenticity and leadership. I know you are as well. So thank you once again.
Okay. And if you could stay up here. We've got a quick presentation for you. We
Oh, is
thank
that what
you
was in
for,
that- Is that was in that bag?
well, I don't think this was, but
Patrick, with a great presentation, gave us a lot to think about here.
Thank you.
I think I will be calling you and asking.
Okay,
some more
wonderful.
stuff.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure, take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Thanks.
that concludes our time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.